Her lipstick was still smudged from his mouth when she looked me in the eyes and said, "You're mistaken. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I can explain." Just those two words, like a verdict I never got to argue. He was still standing there, right beside her, like this was some kind of sick joke, and I was the only one not in on it. My wife, who had once spent an entire week planning our anniversary down to the playlist and scenic candles, now stood under gold-plated chandeliers with someone else's scent on her skin and told me I'd misunderstood what I just saw with my own eyes. I hadn't planned to be there. I hadn't even planned to leave the house that night. But something pulled me. Not suspicion, not intuition, more like gravity. I drove to the event, parked 3 blocks away, and waited in my car for 32 minutes. I remember the exact number because I kept resetting the timer on my dashboard like that would somehow delay the truth. I finally walked into that marble ballroom like someone walking into a fire they know will burn them. And boy, did it burn. She didn't see me at first. She was too busy leaning into a man I'd never met. He had his hand on the small of her back. My spot. His laugh was easy, confident, familiar with her. Their champagne glasses clinked too casually. Her smile bent in ways it hadn't for me in months. And then right there, with no hesitation, he leaned forward and kissed her. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a drunken blip. She kissed him back. So I walked up, not fast, not loud, just present. I said the only thing I could say without falling apart. "You just destroyed our marriage." And she, Eloise, blinked like I'd said something absurd, like I'd confused the weather or forgotten what day it was. "You're mistaken," she said softly, as if I were the one who'd made a fool of myself in front of her. Then she turned her attention back to the man, just like that. That's when I realized she hadn't been caught off guard. She had simply stopped caring whether or not I saw. I didn't leave immediately. I stood there, frozen in that ballroom like I'd wandered into the wrong life. People were walking past me in glittering gowns and polished shoes, brushing against my shoulders as if I was just part of the decor. The music kept playing, some jazzy rendition of an old Sinatra song, cheerful and indifferent to my world collapsing in slow motion. Eloise didn't chase after me. She didn't call out my name. She didn't even glance back. She kept talking to him like nothing had happened. They drifted toward the bar, and I just stood there clutching the little envelope I'd brought with me, an anniversary card I'd written that morning. It had a dumb joke on the front and a message inside that said, "Still choosing you, even when life gets boring." I had no idea I'd be standing in a room watching her choose someone else. I eventually walked out, but not before some young guy in a silver blazer offered me a flute of champagne and said, "You look like you could use this, man." He had no clue. No one did. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. It made me feel awake in a way I hated. I didn't go home. I walked. I walked until my feet hurt, past bars full of laughter, past parked cars steamed up with strangers hooking up, past a bakery that still had its lights on. Everything was alive, moving forward. Meanwhile, I couldn't get past her eyes when she said those 2 words, "You're mistaken." What did that even mean? Did she mean I was mistaken about the kiss? Mistaken about our marriage? Mistaken about the idea that we had anything left? I started spiraling into that place where every memory gets poisoned. You know that place? Where suddenly every girl's weekend feels suspicious. Every late meeting, every moment she smiled at her phone and said, "Oh, just a funny reel." By the time I got home around 2:20 in the morning, the house was still and cold. Her car wasn't in the driveway. I thought maybe she was staying with a friend or maybe she was with him. That thought made my stomach tighten, but I didn't cry. I just sat on the living room floor, turned off all the lights, and listened to the silence. There was a note on the counter. Not handwritten, typed, printed, left deliberately. "You're jumping to conclusions. This isn't how I wanted you to find out. Please don't make this worse than it already is." That was it. No signature, no explanation, no truce. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I went through her side of the closet. Not to snoop, just to see. Some things were missing. Not everything, but enough. A suitcase, her green heels, the perfume she always wore when she wanted to feel powerful. Gone. I should have called someone. I should have done something. But all I did was sit there and wonder if I'd somehow caused this. Like maybe I'd loved her too quietly. Maybe I'd gotten too comfortable. Maybe I made it easy for her to drift away because I never pulled her back. At 6:03 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Vernon, this isn't what you think. Please don't involve anyone else. Let's talk alone. No name, but I knew it was her. I stared at the screen for 20 minutes before typing back. Who is he? 3 dots, then nothing. The typing stopped. I sat there like a fool, watching that little bubble disappear like it took the last of my dignity with it. She still hasn't answered, and I still haven't told anyone. Because how do you explain to people that the person who once kissed you like you were air now kisses strangers in public and tells you that you're the one who got it all wrong? This goes deeper than I thought. And I haven't even told you the part about what I found on her computer. I wish I could tell you I handled the next day with some kind of grace, that I showered, got dressed, made a plan. I didn't. I didn't even change clothes. I stayed in those wrinkled slacks and that stupid, itchy dress shirt, sitting on the living room floor with a half-eaten protein bar and a flat bottle of ginger ale. Felt like moving would make everything too real. Like standing up would somehow mean I was accepting what had happened. And I wasn't ready. By 11 a.m., I still hadn't heard from her. I walked into our bedroom like I was trespassing in someone else's life. The bed was made too perfectly, actually, which was ironic because Eloise never made the bed. There was something cold about the room, not just the air, but the way it felt like she'd already left mentally weeks ago and was just waiting for the moment to physically walk away. I didn't mean to go through her laptop. I swear I didn't. I was looking for my spare car key, which I thought was in the drawer beside her vanity. It wasn't, but her laptop was open, not locked, just there, waiting. My hand hovered over the touchpad for maybe a minute before I gave in. You can judge me if you want, but I needed something, anything, a clue, a reason, an anchor in a sea of madness. I didn't find photos or videos, nothing scandalous, nothing graphic. What I found was worse. There was a folder on her desktop titled Recalculate. Just that word, all caps, no context. Inside were documents, dozens, some titled with numbers, others with dates. They weren't what I expected. They were personal notes, reflections, letters, but not to me. Not even really about me. They were about her and him. Yes, him. His name was all over one document. Silas. I don't know Silas. I've never met a Silas. But according to her writing, she's been meeting with him for nearly 4 months. Some kind of emotional recentering. That's what she called it. Like therapy, but not official. Just 2 people sharing energy. I wanted to throw the laptop, smash it. Instead, I kept reading. In one of the entries, dated 2 weeks ago, she wrote, "When I'm with Silas, I don't feel like someone's wife. I feel like myself. There's no guilt, just clarity. I know Vernon loves me, but his love feels like a blanket I can't breathe under anymore. It's too safe, too soft. I need friction. I need to be seen." That broke me in a different way. It wasn't the kiss or even the secrecy. It was that she saw my love as something suffocating, something she needed to escape. And I hadn't even realized I was holding her down. That night at the gala, it wasn't an accident. It was a decision. A calculated final move in a game I didn't even know I was playing. I copied everything. Every file. I don't even know why. Maybe I needed proof. Maybe I was just clinging to something solid. But when I closed the laptop, I sat there and felt like a man who died in his sleep and woke up in someone else's body. Around 4 p.m., her number finally called. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to. I desperately did. But because I didn't know what version of her I'd be speaking to. The Eloise I married, or the one who writes about me like I'm a well-meaning ghost she's trying to shake off. She left a voicemail. Her voice sounded calm. Too calm. "Vernon, I know you're hurting. I want to talk. No more confusion. I'm ready to be honest now, but only if you're ready to hear it. No yelling, no accusations. Just truth. Let me know." I didn't call back. Instead, I sat in the hallway outside our bedroom, the one we painted together 7 years ago, and stared at the walls while the sun went down. At one point, I think I whispered, "Who are you?" out loud. And the terrifying part was, I wasn't sure who I was anymore either. I agreed to meet her not because I was ready. I wasn't. But because the silence had started to feel more dangerous than the truth. There's something about unanswered questions that rots a person from the inside. And I was already falling apart quietly. I figured if I was going to be broken, I at least wanted to know what had shattered me. We met at a diner just outside town. Not some fancy cafe or hotel lobby. A small place with sticky menus and cracked vinyl booths. I think she picked it on purpose, somewhere neutral, too plain to make memories in. I showed up 10 minutes early. She walked in exactly on time. That used to be one of the things I loved about her. Eloise was never late, never flustered, always collected. Now it just made her feel more distant. She looked different, not just in the way people physically change when they're hiding things, but her posture, the way she didn't scan the room for me because she already knew where I'd be. It was like she expected to find me exactly where she left me. Waiting. She sat across from me without saying a word. The server came over and she ordered coffee. I didn't order anything. Couldn't. My stomach had been a knot for days, and the idea of sipping something while she told me why she'd kissed another man felt grotesque. I waited. She didn't rush. She stirred her coffee like this was a normal Tuesday. Then she finally spoke. "I didn't lie to hurt you," she said. "I lied because I didn't know how else to escape without lighting the whole house on fire." I said nothing. I didn't trust my voice. She continued, "I never cheated. Not physically until that night. Not once. Not before that. I know that doesn't make it better, but you need to hear it. The kiss. That was a beginning for me, not the end of something. You blinked a hair. You kissed a stranger in front of me. Silas isn't a stranger," she said quietly. "You just didn't know him." I felt my hand curl into a fist on the table, not in anger, but in panic. She was talking like I was the outsider in my own marriage. "I met him at a retreat for clarity. A reset thing. You knew I went," she added quickly, as if defending herself. "It wasn't secret. He was a facilitator." "You kissed a therapist?" I asked, the word already making me feel stupid. She shook her head. "He's not a therapist. It wasn't like that. It started after the sessions ended, months after. And it wasn't just a kiss." She looked me in the eye then, and I wish she hadn't. I wish she'd looked away or down or anywhere else. Because what I saw in her expression wasn't shame. It was relief, as if confessing this was her first honest act in months. "You want to know why?" she asked. "Because I felt alive again with him." I laughed. I didn't feel like I was dragging someone through life. I didn't feel like someone's habit. That word hit harder than I expected. Habit. That's how she saw me. I'd become a coffee mug she kept using out of routine. Chipped but familiar, impossible to throw away without guilt. "I'm not saying this to punish you," she said gently. "But Vernon, you stopped being curious about me years ago. You used to ask questions. You used to notice things. Then it was just dinner, bills, and the same 3 shows every night. I didn't want to cheat. I wanted to scream. I finally spoke, and my voice cracked. Why didn't you tell me?" She didn't answer right away. She looked out the window like she was trying to find a softer version of this world before responding. "Because I knew you'd try to fix it. And I didn't want to be fixed. I want to be different. I didn't want to be yours anymore." I should have yelled. I should have stormed out. I did neither. I sat there and nodded like she was reading me the weather. She reached in her purse and pulled out an envelope. My name was on the front in her handwriting. She slid it across the table. "I wrote this before the gala, in case you found out." I didn't touch it. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said. "I'm not even asking you to understand. I just need you to let me go the way I let go of us a long time ago." She left before I could respond. Just stood, thanked the server, and walked out into the gray afternoon like she hadn't just unzipped the last pieces of my identity and tossed them onto a Formica table. I sat there for over an hour before I touched the envelope. Inside was a letter. It started with, "This isn't goodbye, because that already happened. You just didn't see it." I told myself I wasn't going to read it. I put the envelope in my coat pocket and convinced myself I'd burn it, shred it, leave it unread. Some stupid attempt at reclaiming dignity. But back home, alone in the living room where the echo of our past life still lingered in the rugs and the lamp she picked out, I caved. I opened the envelope. There were 6 pages, handwritten. No salutation. No, dear Vernon. No to my husband. Nothing warm or familiar to hold on to. Just a raw, uninterrupted stream of thought. Like she knew the moment I started reading, I wouldn't stop. She began with, "The truth is, I didn't expect to make it to year 12. Not because I didn't love you, but because I didn't know how to love myself while I was next to you. You're safe." And safe becomes invisible. There it was again, the word safe. As if my stability had somehow dulled her senses. As if waking up every day beside someone who would never lie, cheat, or wander was a burden. She wrote about routines, how they grew heavy, about how she would sometimes drive the long way home just to avoid walking into the quiet. About the nights she lay beside me staring at the ceiling, wondering what version of her I was seeing, and why none of them made me want to ask, "Are you okay?" "I did ask, didn't I?" she wrote. "I stopped trying to be seen by you. I started dressing differently, not for attention, but to feel like I still existed as a separate thing. When you stopped looking, I started looking elsewhere." Each line tightened my chest like a slow constrictor. I wanted to scream at the pages. I wanted to argue with every sentence, but I couldn't because part of me, the worst part, knew she was right. I had become comfortable. Not cruel, not cold, just muted. I thought comfort was what love was supposed to become. I didn't realize that silence can be just as sharp as betrayal. Then she mentioned Silas. Silas didn't save me. He didn't even try. He just listened. And then one night he said, "You're a ghost in your own life." And I realized I had been a ghost next to a man who loved a version of me that didn't exist anymore. I couldn't breathe reading that. It felt like all 12 years were dissolving into something fictional, like a story only I had believed in. Like I'd been keeping a house warm for someone who'd already moved out of her mind but was too polite to take her name off the mailbox. But then the letter took a turn. She wrote, "I didn't want you to find out the way you did, but part of me, maybe a part of me, let it happen. I needed you to see that I had stepped out of the portrait we painted together. I needed to stop pretending I could still frame myself inside it." And then, halfway down page 4, "But there's something else I never told you. Something I buried deep enough to forget until recently." I sat up. My pulse actually spiked. 2 years ago, when I said I was in San Diego for that marketing summit, I wasn't. I was in Boulder with Silas. It was the first time. It didn't start physical, but it ended that way. I told myself it was a one-time release, but I lied to you, to him, and worst of all, to myself. I dropped the letter. So it had started then. Not months ago, not weeks ago, not recently. I had been living beside someone who had already betrayed me before I ever noticed a thing. And all those nights I sat watching TV, waiting for her to get home late from debrief dinners or client cocktails. I had no idea. I was making popcorn, folding laundry, choosing which documentary we'd fall asleep to while she was lying to my face. And then came page 5. "There's something else I need to tell you. He's not just a random man. Silas isn't a fling. He's my out, my new map. We're moving to Oregon in a month. That's why I didn't want to have this conversation, because it's not just an ending. It's a beginning I've already planned." I swear my skin went cold. Not because of Oregon, not even because she was leaving, but because she planned this. She was halfway out the door already, picturing her new life, while I still thought we were struggling to reconnect. I looked around our living room. The blanket she always curled up under, the framed photo from our trip to Maine, the key hook by the front door. All of it felt like a museum exhibit. Relics of a life curated by one person while the other didn't know the tour had ended. The last page was short. A single line at the bottom. "Please don't chase me. Just remember who we were, not what we became." That's what she left me with. Not an apology, not closure, just instructions to remember her as a version that had already died and to leave the corpse buried. But that's not what happened next. Because the next morning, someone knocked on my door, and it wasn't her. The knock was soft, hesitant, like whoever was behind the door wasn't sure they wanted to be there. For a second, I actually hoped it was Eloise, that maybe she'd come back to say everything in the letter was just some kind of breakdown, that she didn't mean it, that it wasn't too late. But deep down, I knew she was already gone. Not just physically. She was never coming back. Not to me. Not to this. I opened the door. It was a man I'd never seen before. Mid-30s, maybe younger. Thin frame, nervous eyes. He wore a black windbreaker zipped all the way to the top and held an envelope in one hand. At first, I thought maybe he was a courier, but he wasn't holding himself like someone dropping off a package. He looked like he'd been rehearsing something all morning and just ran out of time. "You're Vernon, right?" he asked. I nodded. He handed me the envelope. "I wasn't supposed to come here, but you deserve to know." Before I could ask anything, he turned and walked back to a silver Honda parked 2 houses down. I stood there for a minute, staring at the envelope, then back at the car as it pulled away. I hadn't even asked his name. My hand was shaking by the time I closed the door. Inside the envelope was a single piece of paper. No return address, no heading, no explanation, just a printed note in plain typeface, like it had been written on some ancient office computer. "Silas isn't who she thinks he is. He's done this before. You're not the first husband, and she's not the first wife." There was an address scribbled at the bottom in pen. No city, just a street and number. I Googled it. It was real. 2 hours north. A small town outside of Terre Haute. My heart started pounding. Not because I believed it. Not yet. But because it felt like something cracked open. Some hidden layer under all this pain. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Was this more than an affair? I sat on it for the rest of the day, stared at that address on and off like it was a lit fuse. I didn't know what I was chasing. The truth, revenge, answers, or just something to focus on besides my own failure. But by evening, I'd packed a small bag and was on the road. The drive was slow, quiet. I didn't even play music, just the hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional voice in my head, replaying everything Eloise had said in that diner. Every sentence now felt heavier, suspicious, like it had double meanings I hadn't caught in the moment. The address led me to a narrow house tucked behind an overgrown hedge, almost hidden from the road. There were no lights on. I knocked once, then again. No answer. I circled around back and nearly turned around until I saw the broken porch light flicker on and off like it was welcoming me. The back door was unlocked. I know what you're thinking. That I shouldn't have gone in, that I was trespassing, that I was unstable. And maybe I was. But I stepped inside. The house smelled faintly of cologne and something else. Dust maybe. The living room was sparsely furnished but tidy. It didn't feel lived in. Felt staged. There was a wall covered in photos. Dozens of them. Couples smiling, laughing, vacation shots, holidays, some in front of fireplaces, some on boats. At first, it looked like any sentimental gallery. But then I noticed a pattern. In each photo, Silas. A little older in some, thinner in others, a beard in one, clean-shaven in another. But it was him. Always him, with different women, different homes, different husbands just out of frame. And in more than a few, I recognized the same gestures, the same expressions, like he was playing a role on repeat. I found a box on a side table labeled correspondence. Inside were letters, dozens, all addressed to E. Not Eloise, other E's. Erica, Eliza, Erin, Evelyn. Every letter had the same tone. Poetic, warm, full of promise. And in a drawer beneath that, an entire folder titled Closures. One of them had my name on it. I opened it. It was a printed copy of Eloise's letter, the exact one she'd given me at the diner. My blood went cold. I flipped through more folders, more letters, identical wording, slight variations, names changed, cities swapped. But the framework, the emotional logic, the justification, the language was the same. It hit me all at once. This wasn't organic. This wasn't a tragic love story. It was a pattern. Silas was a predator. Not in the way you think. Not someone who forces or manipulates with threats. He seduced discontent. He harvested collapse. He found married women at emotional crossroads and positioned himself as their exit. And when they left, when they gave everything up, he vanished. It wasn't love. It was ritual. And Eloise had no idea. I sat down on the edge of a couch I didn't belong on and laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of it broke me in a new way. I thought I was the fool who failed to keep his wife. But I wasn't the first. I wasn't special. I wasn't even a person in this story. I was just a recurring character in someone else's performance. I took photos of everything. And when I left, I locked the door behind me. Not that it mattered, because by the time I got home, there was already a voicemail from Eloise. Her voice was shaking, and she said 3 words I never expected to hear again. I need help. The voicemail was short, only 5 seconds, but it didn't need to be longer. I'd recognize that voice anywhere. I'd recognize it even if it was buried under static or drowned out by traffic. It was Eloise, but it wasn't her usual voice. It wasn't sharp or composed or irritated like she'd been lately. It was small, cracked, terrified. I need help, she said. That's all. 3 words, no context, then silence. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. I grabbed my keys, my jacket, and drove. I didn't even know where I was going. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I tried 3 more times on the drive, each ring slicing open the pit in my stomach a little wider. She had been staying with a coworker, someone named Robin, according to a vague comment she'd made in her letter. I only knew the name. I didn't have an address, but I remembered the company. I pulled into the parking lot of her office, not expecting much, just praying someone would know where she was. The building was dark, but the cleaning crew was still inside. I knocked until someone opened the door, a young janitor in earbuds who looked like I'd just woken him from a dream. I told him my wife worked there. I told him it was urgent. To my surprise, he let me in and pointed me toward the employee break room. That's where I found Robin. Or more accurately, she found me. I must have looked like a wild man standing there, eyes bloodshot, mumbling about voicemail fragments and missing people. But when I said, Eloise, something shifted in her face like she'd been holding her breath for days. She left this morning, Robin said. Said she needed to clear her head, that she was going to meet someone. I asked who. She hesitated. Silas. I felt the blood leave my face. I told her everything, or at least enough. About the photos, the letters, the pattern. Robin didn't look surprised. She looked confirmed. Then she told me something I hadn't expected. Eloise found something in his car yesterday. A burner phone. She didn't tell me what was on it, just that it made her feel sick. She said she thought he'd been hiding more than just women. More than women? I asked if she meant other relationships. She shook her head. No, I think she meant something darker. She said, what if I wasn't special? What if I was just next? Those words froze me. Robin gave me the name of a cabin up north. Silas apparently used it often. Told Eloise it was his retreat center. My hands trembled as I punched the coordinates into my GPS. It was nearly midnight, but I didn't care. I needed to find her. I needed to get there before she slipped further into whatever this was, or before he took her somewhere even I wouldn't be able to reach. The road was pitch black, the kind of black that swallows headlights. My mind was racing faster than the car. I was terrified, not just for her, but of what I'd do if I found them together. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I was afraid I wouldn't feel anything at all. The gravel crunched under my tires as I approached the cabin. It was quiet, too quiet. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, listening. Then I saw the flicker of light from inside. One window, dim and unsteady, maybe candlelight, maybe a lantern. I stepped out of the car, my feet sinking slightly into the soft dirt. My heartbeat felt like it had moved to my throat. I knocked on the door once, twice. Nothing. Then a shuffle, a creak. It opened a crack, and there she was. Eloise, mascara streaked, hair wild, hands trembling. She pulled me inside without a word and locked the door behind us. Where is he? I asked. She didn't answer, just pointed. Silas was lying on the floor of the cabin, unconscious, breathing but barely. A bottle of pills was spilled across the floor. An empty bottle of gin beside it. There were photos scattered everywhere. But they weren't just of women. Some were of men, elderly, young, even children. None of them were labeled. None of them looked recent. I looked at Eloise. She was crying now. Not pretty tears. Deep, guttural sobs that came from someplace far beneath shame. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear, Vernon, I didn't know." I believed her, because I could see it in her eyes. That moment when the fantasy finally cracks and you realize the person you thought could save you was never even real. I called 911. As we waited, she told me everything. She'd gone through his bag after seeing a message pop up on his burner phone that read, "Do you want to start again? I can be someone else this time." She searched the phone. There were texts, hundreds of them, not just to women, but to people he had pretended to be. Fake names, fake voices, fake jobs. He was a chameleon, a manipulator, maybe worse. But Eloise hadn't left because she wanted someone dangerous. She left because she felt empty. And he filled that emptiness with lies so carefully crafted that they looked like hope. I held her as she cried. And somewhere in that moment, I realized the story stopped being about betrayal a long time ago. It was about identity, about how people lose themselves, about how I'd spent so long being afraid to be enough that she went searching for someone who looked like clarity but was actually chaos in disguise. The ambulance came quietly, as if even the sirens didn't want to disturb what we'd just gone through. Silas was loaded onto a stretcher, unconscious but stable. The paramedics asked questions. We answered. The deputies arrived minutes later and began photographing the cabin, collecting evidence. The burner phone, the photos, the bottle, everything. Eloise sat on the porch steps with a blanket around her shoulders, still shaking. I sat beside her, not touching, not speaking, just being there. The night was impossibly still. The sky above us was ink black. The stars scattered like tiny exit signs reminding us there was still a way out of this mess. One of the officers came over with a clipboard and said, "He's got priors in 3 states. Fraud, identity theft, manipulation of vulnerable adults. Nothing stuck before, but what we found tonight might." He looked between the two of us. "You did the right thing calling this in." And just like that, Silas wasn't a mystery anymore. He was a pattern. A man who perfected the art of emotional mirroring, of becoming whatever someone needed just long enough to convince them to give up their lives. And when they did, he vanished. He wasn't dangerous in a cinematic way, but in the subtle way, the kind that erodes your sense of self before you even realize what's missing. By the time we got back to town, it was nearly 4 a.m. I offered to drive her back to Robin's place, but she shook her head. "Can I come home for a while?" she asked. Home. It still existed in her vocabulary. That word sat on the edge of my chest like a question I hadn't been ready to hear. We didn't speak much on the drive. The silence between us wasn't angry anymore. It felt fragile, respectful, and maybe, just maybe, it was something closer to peace. Back at the house, she walked in like someone visiting a memory. Her eyes touched everything. The couch, the pictures, the coat rack. When she saw the envelope still sitting on the coffee table, unopened since the night I read its copy at the cabin, she winced. Then she sat beside me. "I never stopped loving you," she said. "I just stopped loving myself inside this version of our life. And I didn't know how to ask for help." I nodded because I finally understood. I told her I couldn't go back to how things were. That trust doesn't snap back like a rubber band. That takes time. But I also told her I was willing to begin again. Not as husband and wife. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But as 2 people who shared a story and still had more to say. So that's what we did. We didn't file for divorce. We didn't rush to therapy. We just slowed down. She moved back into the guest room. We started having coffee together again in the mornings. No pressure, no expectations. Some nights we'd sit in the living room and talk. Not about Silas, not about the affair, but about memories. Our first road trip, the time the power went out and we played board games by candlelight. The little things we'd both let slip. Weeks passed, then months, and something strange happened. We started laughing again. Not constantly, not effortlessly, but honestly. We were rebuilding. Not what we had, but something new, something quieter, kind of realer. I don't know if we'll stay together forever. And for once, that's not the scary part. What matters is that we both stepped out of the wreckage and realized we weren't buried. We were bruised, cracked open, but alive, and more aware of each other and ourselves than we'd ever been before. So here I am, writing this not with bitterness, but with clarity. I once said, "You just destroyed our marriage." But I was wrong. Maybe she didn't destroy it. Maybe she exposed what was already crumbling and gave us both a chance to rebuild something honest. Together or apart, but finally awake.